heads of foundations, companies, NGOs, elected officials here, and I know the list goes on. Thank you everyone for being here for this second Paris Peace Forum. This may be the hardest one yet. And I say that to everyone because at the first one, lots of people came because it was the 100th year anniversary of the armistice. We had more than 60 heads of state here, and if I may say, the novelty drew some people in. This second one represents stability and maybe ennui. So your presence here, your commitment, everyone, is a test for us and shows that there's something there, but we need to build something that is sustainable, i.e. useful. So I'd like to thank you for being here. Thank you for being so committed. And I would also like to tell you how convinced I am that this Paris Peace Forum, what we're doing here today, is fundamentally useful. The first use is exactly what we just heard. Having an Indian activist, then the President-elect of the European Commission, the Vice President of China and the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, there are few places where these speeches can be so meaningful. And it shows how useful the process is. This is through whom and through what we will forge the world of tomorrow, and this shows what can happen in the future if we do not all sit around the same table. Madam President, you were saying that not that long ago we were celebrating peace not only in France but in Europe. Many people here today were seeing their country being born out of the ash of the war. Many countries were affected, and Europe thought that it would never happen again. There is one lesson amongst many others to take from this, is that we failed in building sustainable peace, because after that First World War we were not able to find the proper ways to cooperate in a multilateral way. It was the Society of Nations and it failed. No one reasonably thought that less than 20 years after that, new forms of brutality would be born, that a war greater still would begin and once again tear through Europe and the world. 30 years ago, almost today, the Berlin Wall fell. With it, divisions in Europe, treachery and pent-up angst, fighting for freedom not only in Germany but through Eastern Europe in ways that sometimes prepared for the fall of the Berlin Wall, created a new force that would lead about a new paradigm in Europe, that we thought democracy would spread, happiness would spread. Some people at the time spoke of the end of history, which was being born. And once again, we were wrong. Unfortunately, again. Because if there was a happy time on our European continent after that, the last years have shown us how modern fractures, modern tears, can put an end to what we thought was inevitable. I take these two examples, these two anniversaries, because we are in the direct line set by them. Suffice to say that there is no manifest destiny, and if modern times seem difficult, it is in difficult situations that the best solutions can be created. So the predictions that we made in the past were sometimes undone by ourselves. So there is a lot to be hopeful for from this meeting. There are deep fractures present and a lot of pessimism present. That is why I firmly believe in this meeting, this Paris Peace Forum. because the speeches we just heard opening our forum show what I believe in, which is an unprecedented crisis in our system, not because this time it is not coming at the end of a world conflict, but is coming from a self-created crisis in our system. It's like a chemical reaction. Let me explain. We have a crisis in our world political and economic system. The market economy, openness, free trade, cooperation systems that were invented after the Second World War. And these systems have been amazingly effective for 70 years. Been able to draw hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, as Mr. Vice President explained. We've pacified a lot of regions where we thought conflict was inevitable. We've enabled a system of checks and balances. But the last years have shown us that new inequalities have emerged, sometimes in our own societies. Modern societies have broken down in some ways, with new forms of democracy emerging. We've seen the re-emergence of unilateralism, even in some people who we thought were the last bastions of multilateralism. Therefore, we have a self-made crisis. On an economic and political stage, the system is in crisis, but we're also seeing things emerge over the last 10 years, new issues. We're seeing demographic challenges and the great migrations that we are seeing. Sometimes we only address the consequences, but how do we feed a country that continues to grow? How do we feed a population that continues to grow? The main migratory flows are present within the continent of Africa, sometimes in Asia as well. We're seeing technological challenges, digital that is transforming the way we work, the way we interact within our countries, and also the challenge of climate change, the fight against the warming of the planet and the fight for biodiversity. These are three main challenges, and there are others, but these three main challenges, if you add them to a challenge that is not new, which is the fight for freedom and democracy, these challenges come about at a time when our societies and systems are fractured, when to face these challenges we need more cooperation. So the risk that we are all running is to see the temptation in our countries re-emerge in all of the countries that are represented here today to either be lazy. That's the first risk. We've got our organizations, they work well, let's not question them. Sometimes they've lost their raison d'etre, but let us just sweep that under the rug. Molière said it well, and everything's going to be fine. I don't believe that. I've said that in ways that sometimes have shocked some of the people in this room in the last days or weeks. Sometimes hard truths are necessary, and there's no point putting our heads in the sand. Why? Because our citizens see what's going on. The world is open. The experts here, the activists, the citizens see that the system isn't working and tell us when it's not working. So hypocrisy and silence is not a solution. And laziness in our thoughts or our actions is not a solution either. The second temptation is just as risky. That would be to not cooperate, moving back towards unilateralism or hyper-regionalism. I believe that that solution is tempting but is extremely risky. It might be easy to think that it's much easier to downsize, to close off from the world and to solve your solutions at home first, believing that the world is too open. We've seen people try this in the past, and it leads to war. Nationalism leads to war. Tricia, you reminded us of the difference between patriotism and nationalism. A lack of cooperation would deconstruct what we have been able to build over the last decades. And it can lead to a third risk as well. Hegemony. Saying, okay, Faced with these crises, we need new powers to emerge and then we'll follow suit. And that would be a solution. Saying, okay, there are some big powers that will solve the problems for others and then we just align ourselves behind them. And I say this as a representative of a country that has tried to do this in the past as a colonial power. We have attempted to do this in freedom's name, saying we're going to solve the problems around the world. We understand things, we're going to explain it to the rest of the world. It doesn't work in the long term and it is no longer possible in today's world. So, hegemony or sharing power amongst some superpowers is not a solution because it will lead again to frustration and to resentment and to humiliation. To face these challenges, I see only one solution. It is the hardest and most complex. It is cooperation, balanced cooperation, multilateralism. So a solution that accepts dissent, mediation, disagreement to find shared solutions. The dialogue that we had between the first three speeches today and the dialogue that we will hear over the coming days between the different stakeholders and countries is essential in my mind. Europe is a continent where we can build solutions. Madam President, thank you for being here, despite your busy timetable and presenting a geopolitical solution for Europe. I profoundly believe that Europe has part of the solution for the very simple reason that our Europe, and many people here actively participate in this process as members of the European Union or geographically present in Europe, Europe is a laboratory for multilateralism, maybe the most complex laboratory in the world because Europe has had infighting for thousands of years. So Europe is the place where we know the price of not cooperating. So being able to find balance, even when everything is pushing us apart, is a treasure. Europe must be sovereign, democratic, and find solutions, find new balances. And I think can be a power broker in some ways between the US and China. A third party, being independent, having its own voice, and serving to build useful solutions, as you said, Madam President. And I believe we can continue to be partners in these international fora and continue to build new solutions with a reworked Europe with all of our regional partners as well. I believe that this is Europe's destiny, to bring together the willful powers working for good, the forces for multilateralism pushed for by our Ministry for Foreign Affairs, and I'd like to thank them here. This started with the United Nations Forum with Ministers Mas and Le Drian, and this shows what Europe can bring with the multitude of nations and the European Commission. Then we have Asia. Mr. Vice President, you mentioned this. Many heads of state and government are here today from Central Asia, from India and from elsewhere. Today, Asia is facing huge challenges related to peace, stability, finding new solutions, clarifying border disputes. Demography and religion are challenges as well. Asia has been a laboratory for conflict in the past in a way that affects Europe, in a way that is intertwined with our own challenges in Europe. I underline that once again here today and reiterate our full commitment to solving solutions that continue, to solving problems that continue to divide us. The initiative you took is part of the solution. Connectivity with the European Union is a way through which we can achieve dialogue with China, and the role of China, as you reminded us, is an important component of stability. So I'd like to thank you, Mr. Vice President, for speaking firmly on this. I believe that your role in the solution to climate change, as you mentioned, is important. When it comes to fighting against climate change, global warming, and protecting biodiversity, the role that Asia can play is an important one. 2020 has a number of important meetings coming up. The European-Chinese dialogue, the economic solutions to climate change will be vital. The COP15 as well, which will take place in China, is an important meeting as well. Then we have Africa. President Tshisekedi, you spoke beautifully of not just your country, but also of conflict. Many presidents are here today. Many of them have taken time from their busy schedules, despite leading countries that are being shaken by terrorism, by groups that are contesting national sovereignty, by groups that are shaking not only the stability of their country, of their continent, but also ours. Our destinies are intertwined. I believe that Africa, as I discussed yesterday with some of you, is today experiencing a great challenge. Africa has long been the object of multilateralism. Now it is becoming a key component of multilateralism, taking an active role. And I would like to commend all of the African states represented here today who are taking their destiny in hand, building concrete solutions. Tunisia has been able to do this with great courage when they needed to rebuild their democracy a number of years ago. And we have their First Minister here today who has boldly rebuilt the destiny of their country. The whole African continent, especially the Sahel region, is faced with this challenge today, and the strength of African countries to face the security, military and demographic challenges is key. We, as part of the world order, need to build solutions alongside the US so that we can better than today support the security of Africa, but also help them build education, healthcare, environmental and economic measures. These are the 4 solutions to build sustainable peace and to avoid the re-emergence of these destabilizing factors. So with these 3 components, without forgetting the other countries that I have yet to mention, we can see the emergence of a shared agenda, new partnerships that we can forge. I believe that through our ability to build modern solutions, we need dialogue with the United States, the American countries, of course. I hope that for the 3rd meeting, we will be able to get them more involved, to better contribute to the dialogue. But of course, there are ways to develop new ways to cooperate and to speak together. We have some means, including the United Nations. Sometimes these fora have issues, and we need to push forward to forge a shared agenda. And I would like to conclude with this. The strength, the added value of this forum, the value of the ongoing debate comes from our ability to build new ways to cooperate, new ways to work together between our international organizations, as we have done in the fight against inequality in the last weeks in Biarritz, between international organizations and countries, between governments and international organizations, NGOs, foundations and companies. Through the dialogue in the next 2 days, but also around the year, we can show that we have a shared agenda, fighting against discrimination and fighting for access to rights, fighting to build new balances and new rights in the digital era, fighting against climate change and for biodiversity, building sustainable structures to deal with migration, fighting against the geographical imbalances and against conflict. Many of you here today are affected by this, and I hope that through our discussions we can forge a path on some of these issues. If we all here today share an agenda, that is useful in and of itself. We can fight for new forms of cooperation. Our enterprises can fight against inequality, partnerships for information and equality, which is shared by a number of elected officials and NGOs working for better cooperation. The Christchurch call between governments, between companies, to fight against terrorist content and to help to be more effective. These are examples of concrete innovation where players who did not speak before are now in open dialogue. This forum is an example of what can be done. We're not here to be competitors to the institutions of modern multilateralism, but to help them reinvent themselves, to be useful, to be a complement to them. Why is unilateralism re-emerging in some countries? Why is doubt emerging? Because citizens are holding our ineffectiveness against us, our ability to put our head in the sand or to not act fast enough. I believe that building these solutions, forging new alliances and innovating are key components of the shared answer that we can bring to our shared issues across our countries and to create the cooperation that I just mentioned. Agnès Heller passed away, and she was a militant, like you, Tricia, for freedom. She was more than 90 years old when she passed. She was a Hungarian intellectual, and every day she would bathe in the Hungarian lakes, and one day in July she didn't come back because her indignation, her fight gave her force of life. She was a great woman, and she said that our times more than ever need a form of heroism that is working to seize the now. The task remains, she said, to make us available to those who despise us. That form of humility, that heroism that Agnès speaks of, is our ability to understand the world as it is and to try and provide answers. Not the cowardice of staying in our old habits, the cowardice of not acting, or the comfort of being far removed from the daily life of some of our citizens. That leads to imbalance, to conflict. This is about the daily lives of our citizens. We need to solve their problems. That is what we received our mandates to do. We must continue to act usefully. And that is why I believe in the usefulness of this forum. And I would like to thank the President and the Director General, all of the organizers, and also all of the contributors, and you for your presence here today in Paris. Thank you.